Well, tachyon energy was considered to be hypothetical subatomic particles that
That's not
travel.
true.
Okay.
Well, that's the way you like the word. First of all, if it's hypothetical, then it can't be particles. And when you say tationic, what they're leaving out is, you gotta understand, the Caucasian has this way of using big words. All it means is to tack on. If you took and combed your hair and put it over a piece of paper, when that paper magnetically attracts to that comb, that's tacking on. That's another way of saying tachyonic. So when they say tachyon energy, they're talking about something I told y'all long ago when I said you was an Etherian being, and all of the bacteria in life cling to that thing and form the body. That's a form of tachyonic energies. So so it can't be a theory when it's a reality. And it is a reality because things are magnetically attracted, and when they do, they tap on. So we're just saying because they do that, they play word games with us to confuse us. Go ahead.
It was considered to travel faster than the speed of light. And I was wondering, how can it travel faster than the speed of light without being able to log it by light?
You can log it by light, and let me show you why. When you say traveling faster than the speed of light, if I put this bottle here, and the amount of current being drawn from a magnet where that brother sits, the amount of magnetic pull based on the amount of electricity that's charged that magnet will determine how fast, by the weight of the particle, this here bottle gets in it. All right, now light travels 186,072 feet, right? So what they're doing is saying we have to know the mass, amount of weight, versus the amount of magnetic energy pull to determine how fast this weight takes, or how fast it takes for this weight to get there. And the reason why they don't log it is they say because by the time it gets there, it has altered time. Because it takes the moment that it sends, what magnets do, it sends out a current. And when the current reaches it, it hooks it and then begins to pull it. So the timing is, they're not inclusive of the time in which it sends out the current. They're only dealing with the distance from here to there. So they say they're not able to log it because they can't tell exactly until this thing starts to move how much or how fast that current took to get here. It's only once it grabs it and then it moves this piece of matter that they can weigh that piece of matter and determine. That's why it says that.
Taiwan.
What's up there, old fella?
And I wanted to ask, who was whom to Ray in relationship to who gave Ray rulership on this side of the universe?
Say it again because it sounds very confusing to me. Okay. Who was who to Ray?
Yeah, what was whose relationship to Ray, being that who he gave Ray rulership on this side of the universe?
Okay. When you say who he gave, you realize when you say who he, you've now switched into the Yahwehians, right? Because who he, if you spell it out, H-U-H-I, is nothing but Yahweh backwards. The I becomes the Y, H-U becomes the W in Hebrew, Yahweh. So you're talking about the root seed or the first Yahwehian. Now who is the first Yahwehian? In order for, you do know. Who was the first Yahweh, according to the Bible? Who was the first Yahweh? It says, then men began to call on the name of Yahweh. It says in the Bible, then men began to call. So when you get in the book, when you go from Genesis down, right, there's a certain point where the deity is referred to as Elohim, or Yelohim, or Elohim, and then it becomes Elohim Yahweh, or Elohim Jehovah, or Elohim Jehovah. You know what I'm saying? But then it says, then men began to call on the name Yahweh. And that started when men identified an individual being as the Yahuwah. Because right in the language there in Hebrew, it's in a singular. Anybody know the quote we're talking about? Where? Talking about Tammuz. Talks about, that's right, Tammuz. Then men began to call on Yahweh. And that's why it speaks in the book of Ezekiel that all the women of the house of Judah went into the temple of Yahweh and called on Tammuz. They went into the temple of Yahweh in Ezekiel and called on Tammuz because Tammuz was appointed as the one god over mortals when mortals had reduced their vibrational level down to where they are now. They appointed one god. Whenever you say one god, you're dealing with the term monad. Monad. When you go to two gods, you're dealing with the term duad, from which they get dual. And when you go to the next stage, they're going into triad. So in logging gods, they never went past three. They only went one monad from monos, two duad from dual, and three triad. You follow? Because they were having a conflict between three deities. One deity was Enlil, another deity was Enki, and another one was Murdoch, who also appointed Tammuz to be the one God. So when Muslims are talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as wahdahu la sharika lahu, the one God of which there is no partners, or when the Jew is saying Elohim Adonai, Elohim Echad, and they're talking about Elohim as one God is Echad, they're talking about an individual of the Sumerian doctrine who's referred to as Tammuz, whose nickname was Adon. And this Adon became known as Adonis, from which you get the word adoration. And that Adonis became known as Adonai. And that's when they became one God. When they were not allowed to refer to him as his name because Yahoo was not a name, but four symbolic letters describing the hand, the life. They were symbolic in the Kabbalah and in the Abjad of the ancient languages. When they could no longer pronounce the name properly after Babylon, what they did is they started referring to him as, in Hebrew, Hashem. Hashem. I'm going to get back to the point. Hashem. Hashem means the name in Hebrew. But the word Shem also means out there. It's a Hebrew word for there as opposed to here. So when they dealt with the deity Yahuwah as the force who is the creative source of will, but there's a gender clash in there. Because Huhi is inclusive of Hua and Hia. Hua is the ancient Hu for masculine, and He ancient for female. Huhi became neutral gender, thus rendered a it. Yeah? And when it became an it, they create the word iota. Iota, you know what that means? A dot. And in Hebrew, an iota is the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet and one step after birth. Birth ends at what number? Birth, conception. The next so-called number is a tetion. What is it? 10. 1 and Sifra. The 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Yod. Yod is symbolic of the hand. As Michelangelo sends a picture of God reaching his finger pointing down, or in Hebrew, whenever a priest called a Kohen is going to read from the Tanakh or the Torah, what he has is a stick in his hand with a hand on it, because he's not allowed to touch the Tanakh or Torah because it's sacred and holy. And the way they get the word, I'll touch on this later, they get the word Torah or Tawarat from the female deity, who's the Tawarat, the center of the zodiac, Zodiacus. That's the other thing. But they use a hand to represent, as the Torah said, that God inscribed his message to humanity by his own hand. The hand of God goes back to the iota, which goes back to the black dot in ancient Egypt, the center of the zodiac, which formed the line, which shaped the wall, which made the block. Muslims now are encompassing the Kaaba. The Kaaba is the central dot of Islam.